Alright guys, I've officially lost my mind with the video title. If you've been watching my analog horror coverage for the past couple of months, you've seen as I've progressed from the strange to the stranger, and today we arrive at the strangest. Though structured like many of the analog horror projects we've grown to know and love, I'll go ahead and say something right now. I've deceived you all a little bit with the title. This project is definitely so far out there that I can't quite categorize it as entirely similar to the other horror we've watched together these past few months. It's just so strange. But if you'll bear with me, you'll quickly see how this is a strength of the project and not a weakness by any means at all. In fact, by some definition of the word, we might be looking at the most terrifying thing I've covered on this channel yet. Before we get into this dreadful art, let me take 10 seconds to ask you to kindly subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this video. We're far along the road to 100,000 subscribers, and with just a little help from you guys, my dream will come true. If you enjoy analog horror content as well as the occasional fan theory, then the Sea Butter channel is the place for you. Further, you're invited to join the channel Discord if you want to be a part of a fun community and have the chance to interact with me, as well as contribute to future videos and video topics. Thank you for giving me your time today, and whether this is your 5th or 52nd video with me, I do hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Today, we're going to be covering a horror project from the aptly named Unorthodox Kitten. Their channel started last year, and it appears they're in the middle of creating this series, which has moderately frequent updates. As always, the link to Unorthodox Kitten's work is in the description of this video, and I implore you to show their channel some love and watch their content in full before or after you watch my video. Though there's no explicit title to this project, I think the title of the 4th video, chronologically and most popular overall, is the best contender. Existence no longer exists. This brief sentence perfectly categorizes this series, which only gets more and more terrifying as we learn what that means. This series exemplifies a unique and frequently unexplored kind of cosmic horror. Though unlike the sometimes seen Lovecraftian monsters and deities or aliens, this looks into what happens when the fundamental laws of math and physics break down. Not just ripping apart and ending our existence, but terminating it from ever having happened. Not a removal, but an erasure, a lack of ever having had existed. The way that goes about happening is very akin to the three-body problem story, where an invading alien race manipulates the laws of physics to disrupt human development. It sounds scary, but it only gets worse when you consider the implications. What happens when things on a spatial or temporal scale happen that are so grand, so massive in scale, that they dwarf us and destroy us as if we were smaller than bugs? It's what happens in this universe, and we're going to pick apart the first upload, bit by bit, to see how this process unfolds. I'll warn you first that this series is very confusing, but if you're a math aficionado, which I am not, you'll have a better time understanding some of these concepts. Very frequently, I do honestly think that big words are just thrown out there for artistic sake and to deepen the sense of scale and unfathomability of the threat, but I do believe there's a lot of sense to some of the math here. Maybe not all of it, obviously, since this is fiction, but it does mean something. If you recognize something or know what something might mean, go ahead and put it in the comments below. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. The first quarter of this upload is hard to describe. Very soon, though, we'll hear a guiding voice, briefly explaining what's going on, though still confusing.
Our closest data cluster, Taiga, permanently isolated, shielded from external existence, due to the fact that this data cluster contains a virus that assumes the guise of absolute truths, a virus that dictates patterns within systems, mathematics. It must be acknowledged that the majority of elements within your set shall forever remain within the confines of the British Sea. The semi-distant and quasi-isolated Taiga, your neighboring data cluster, shall remain a distant, unattainable horizon. Nevertheless, you are now retracing your steps to the very environment from which your existence once sprang, a place where your own being was safeguarded. To this point in time, information concerning the axiomatic systems in this realm has been notably sparse. However, this is unequivocally a thing of the absolute past. In this expedition narrative, the true theory of that environment shall be unveiled.
Though up to this point we still aren't sure what's happening, this shot feels very apocalyptic to me. Whatever we're about to see is changing things, and will do so on a great scale. One thing I picked up on that really sent chills down my spine was the description of mathematics as a virus. It indicates to me that this series suggests that math, a governing body over numbers and objects, anchoring us to a world that we can understand, isn't a common thing in the multiverse. It's infrequent, and the vast majority of existence and life does not enjoy this privilege of stability. And listen here to this use of second-person language. Someone with much more knowledge than us, is explaining what's going on and letting us down easy. They refer to our data cluster, which is the second terrifying thing to accept so far. To whatever we're listening to whoever is speaking, we are nothing but a cluster of numbers. Our entire existence, our universe, our sphere of living, is a piece of data. Though we can see a narrative forming, we can also see the beginning of a pattern with this inserted language, designed to add to the mathematical properties of this story, but also maybe throw us off the scent occasionally.
Initially, it is imperative to introduce the requisite terminology and axioms to facilitate the efficacious comprehension of the narratives presented herein. External terminology, concept. Entity A as a concept of entity B, it implies a fundamental equivalence in the underlying essence of A and B, notwithstanding potential disparities in their attribute sets. Subsequently, should B resurface in the discussion, it inherently references A, unless a distinctly non-conceptual variant of B is explicitly delineated. Concept degree. If we posit that A is a conceptual derivative of B, it becomes imperative to introduce a succinct notation for expeditious communication. In this vein, we designate A as a concept of the first degree with respect to B. Consequently, should A be conceptualized as a derivative of the concept of B, we denote it as a concept of the second degree within the framework of B, and so forth. Interpretation, degree. The nth degree of interpretation conveys the consequence of iteratively interpreting the original conceptualization n times. This pivotal concept serves as the gateway to apprehending entities that would otherwise remain inscrutable in their primary interpretation.
This section, titled External Terminology, is pretty strange. The first bit could be categorized as redundant, honestly, given that we spend a lot of time simply conceptualizing these entities. What we can gain, however, from the nth notation is the idea that these entities can somehow derive infinite times. I don't fully understand the presentation of this, but we're once again dipping into themes of infiniteness and size beyond our comprehension. Before this section ends, though, we do catch a glimpse of something that looks alive.
Internal terminology. Time. The taiga has a variable number of axes in the concept of the second degree of time and space. The concept of unit of time here is called a causal set. A causal set is always characterized by a non-empty intersection of the time axis with at least one causal set of another time axis. Anything referred to as partial past means that it has already occurred in at least one time axis, which exists in a specific class of causal sets in which these data are given. If an event is considered an absolute past, it means it has occurred in all partial pasts of all currently existing time axes. Structure. Structure is a term that can be used to refer to anything that is not non-existent in any causal set that is a subset of the partial past of at least one time axis.
We dive deeper into terminology, which appears to try and explore the temporal dimensions of whatever's going on. Once again, it's clouded with difficult language. So, depending on whether or not you're engaged by this kind of horror, these shots right here are some of the scariest to me. Like a human trying to write a scary story, putting emotions and fear and dread into words, what's happening here is being notated, or at least an attempt is being made. The question is, by who?
Model Zero is a primordial narrative structure that serves as the catalyst for the emergence of other models. The most esteemed theory during your recent conceptual exploration suggests that it is a product of the data cluster itself, taiga. It permeates all spatial regions of the taiga and is distinguished by its ability to generate axiomatic systems through a predetermined algorithm that has remained elusive. It can be represented as a set of non-intersecting Jordan infinitely dimensional curves undergoing iteration, exhibiting behavior reminiscent of algorithmic activity in generating other instances of this model. A higher value of I corresponds to a greater likelihood of reproduction for a specific Model Zero. The Model 01 lacks a discernible origin. It exists because it has existed. Its instances possess the capability to traverse absolute time and instigate events leading to their own genesis. Model 01A gradually undergoes a transformation into Model 01B through the consumption of surrounding Model 0. Once Model 01B is assimilated by Model 011, the remnants of Model 01B give rise to Model 01C, endowed with a wellspring of abstractions bequeathed by Model 011. Over time, Model 01I assimilates surrounding axioms, elevating the quality of abstractions, ultimately culminating in the transformation into Model 01D. Model 01D detaches itself from the concept of the plane and commences movement through the sources that will eventually bifurcate into these units referred to as Model 01F. In this phase, they separate from each other and form structures with a single source, gradually accumulating multiple appendages until they possess 3 appendages, at which point they become Model 011. Model 01I possesses the ability to travel through time, and its sustenance is derived from models of its kind in lower phases. At a certain juncture, there is a possibility that it will sever its source, initiating a new cycle or transforming into either Model 01J1 or Model 01J2. J1 is immobile from a spatial perspective, but can navigate through time, creating new temporal axes for its benefit, while J2 has the capacity to generate new dimensions and freely traverse among them. J2 concludes this phase by creating a new module within this data cluster.
It's here where we actually get the most information about, well, whatever we're supposed to be seeing in these shots right here. In the longest segment of this upload, we are introduced to creatures which are beyond understanding, to an exceptional degree. We learn about their different models, which derive from and grow based off of one another. Beginning with Model 01, we come to quickly learn that these things are super powerful. They exist because they exist. They always have and always will. and possess the ability to travel through time and set in motion the events which create their own existence, birthing themselves. Model 01A is the tiniest instance of Model 01, which, if having fed off of enough instances of Model 01A, grows into Model 01B. These creatures get larger and larger, going through different iterations by combining with one another and growing. This eventually results in Model 011, which has the ability to break into two types of models. One of these are Model 01J1, which are locked spatially but possess the ability to move forward and backward through time linearly. I want to take a second and just ponder how horrifying that is as a concept. Imagine being a living creature that preys off of other iterations of yourself, not by moving around, but by commanding one unit of space for all of eternity. One palace of time where neither the past, nor the present, nor the future are safe. You could think you're fine in one moment, but if you've already passed through Model 01J1's domain, you're toast. No matter if you walk right out, it can simply go back to the time where you crossed this threshold and take you. Now, that's not exactly what happens in the story. These aren't preying on humans, but the groundwork is laid for that kind of terror, which just really blew me away, conceptually. I'd never heard of anything like that before. There's also Model 01J2, which can generate new dimensions, concluding the phase of evolution by creating a new module in the data cluster. Whatever that means.
You have just passed through all non-existent controls to the border point of the existing taiga. No one has recorded your existence because you do not exist. Already, you are able to characterize some properties of the taiga. The taiga is an infinitely dimensional concept of space that has non-Riemannian properties. Since the taiga has a variable number of time axes that change depending on the location, it is necessary to create a time measurement system in order to record these reports. An interpretational algorithm needs to be created, and a time anchor must be secured for a potential sudden return.
The ending monologue of this video addresses something called the taiga, which is extremely important to this story. I say addressed and not explained because it's still difficult to even remotely grasp it at this point. But we'll learn more about it as we move forward. This right here concludes the first upload. I've addressed what I think are major takeaways from the beginning, but we'll wrap up the knowledge from this upload in with the next few at the end of this video, when it all comes together. We'll move on to the next part soon, but first I want to read the description of this video, to plant some ideas in your head about what might be happening here before we move on. The gods, who are the product of a new cycle of fragmentation, despite their almost divine ability to create infinite universes at will, are merely lifeless hypothetical concepts compared to their predecessors from the previous cycle. These predecessors perceive them as weeds that must be eliminated, not out of fear, but as a principle to maintain existential silence. The war of the gods has begun. The ineffective jump occurred. It must be stopped. There is only the infinite filling all canvas. Artificial lethal sea with an infinite iron, trying to see the infinite through you. No light, just interpretation. It came, but you were not here when it arrived. It gratefully retreats, yet the essence remains unchanged. Can existence exist without non-existence? Are you afraid of non-existence now? Also, I just want to note that the song title is You Are Not Here. That's pretty, apt. This context generates just as many questions as it does answers. Are these incomprehensible beings the gods, or are they simply products of one of their own generated universes? Who calls them gods? Are they known to humanity and revered or worshipped? Hopefully, we'll gather more pieces of this puzzle in the next upload. The second upload is titled, Everything is Happening at the Same Time, alluding to some of the temporal anomalies that may be occurring, based off of what we learned initially. The description of the video is brief and reads, The cycle, their god. Existence is the wonderful place beyond our reach as a portrait of everything possible. Yet, you were given no colors, and you were still able to paint a masterpiece of non-existence. You don't have to. Again, we're lost on who writes these messages and just who they're addressed to. This video is much more different from the first, in that it doesn't have narration, and is rather a presentation of the events unfolding in this series. I'll go ahead and play it in full for us now, or you could watch it at the creator's channel and then skip to this timestamp. Whatever you prefer. I can't even begin to describe just how this made me feel, or what I think is happening. But I'll try. This video begins with a shot of the Milky Way galaxy, followed by a zoom out of the universe. At first, it's comprehensible, showing neighboring galaxies and scales and models that we, as humans, can estimate and really picture in our heads. But quickly, it arrives in the realm of undescribable. Massive doesn't begin to describe whatever we're seeing. And this right here is the type of horror that I think this project does best. This creator is painting the unknown, suggesting a possibility for what lies above us in scale, what we are minuscule parts of. However small you think you are and big these things are, it's worse. It's even more indescribable. And here it becomes obvious just how quickly these creatures could wipe out our existence, with the effort of a sneeze. And it seems like, though they don't appear malicious, our incredibly small size might be the only thing that's protected us for this long. We're seeing the creatures from the previous upload, but we still don't know what they're doing, or how they relate to us at all. The next upload will hopefully make that a little bit more clear. The next upload, titled The External Reality of Finiteness, is much like the previous, so I'll present it in the same way. First though, to the video's description. The battle of the gods lasted a fraction of an instant. They did not even realize they no longer existed. Their creation was their doom. Beginning, undefined. Infinite instance within an infinitely small one, as just a mere interpretation of the infinite from the blind, non-existent view of its. Nothing is out of our reach. The physical impossibility of non-existence in the existence of something existing. Before the jump, the celebration orbs were sent, now working as creators' last echoes. The luxury of the majority is to not exist at all. Then, at the end of this video, a link is provided to an academic paper about, well, something. Their creation was their doom? Could it perhaps be that these creatures killed themselves off by their grand manipulation of space and time, somehow destroying themselves before they were born? Or maybe, just maybe, they were created by someone else. Maybe even us. Let's go ahead and watch this video. I love this upload because it's totally a New Year's celebration. The celebration orbs are like fireworks, but for Cthulhu. It's in this video that things take a big turn for the narrative, and we reveal what might be the biggest twist of all. Based on the information we read in the description, could it be that humans were the ones who created these strange beings and they somehow got out of our control? Could we be the gods described here? Keen listeners can identify both human voices and air raid sirens in the background, even if we don't know what's going on. The final upload, however, will cue us in much, much more with regard to this human element. Existence no longer exists opens up with this message. The shells of long abandoned artificial stars, held together by autonomous anti-expansionary devices, were destined to fade into obscurity along with the rest of the universe. It was only a matter of time before the corpse of the Laniakea supercluster followed suit to make space for a new cycle. Gods are dead. The cycle was broken. They tried to be it. They wanted to free themselves from their finite torture, finding the horrifying truth of their existence with a forcefully finite interpretational infinity of iterations. They created it to find the solution. They did. They are now infinite infinity with a finite goal of theirs, with no one to see its infinite torture they made for it in its infinite portrait of inlimitation. Forever alone in an instant of its, it thinks and thinks, not knowing the non-existent palette of it is just another iteration of it in an infinite fractal of instantless existence with an end as finite as infinity. Try saying that 5 times fast. Once again, the end of the description links to another academic paper. I'm not yet going to come up with an interpretation of this description besides the beginning, which identifies a piece of equipment, that being an anti-expansionatory device for artificial stars. These could have been devices designed to provide energy to humans. Let's go ahead and break down the video. These initial messages are nothing short of ominous. To start, I feel like the beginning of this upload confirms that this is taking place from a human-centric perspective, even if maybe billions of years into the future. The name dropping of Milkdromeda Galaxy suggests that this takes place after the collision of the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies, which is supposed to occur in 4.5 billion years. I would imagine that, if humanity made it that long, if they somehow still existed, they would be a lot different, maybe having evolved and becoming unrecognizable to us. It gives credence to the idea that there may be some time manipulation here as well, given the themes of moving through time from earlier. Perhaps we're being warned of something awful before it occurs. Hey, it looks like the seed butter logo. In these sequences of shots, it appears to me like the scale changes rapidly. At first, we're looking at what appears to be a church, with geometric reverence and this strange symbol. But soon enough, it appears that we're face to face with Lovecraftian monsters once more, followed by a reversion back to human scale with these shots of warfare, including artillery and explosions. A human war is being fought, but over what? I think in this shot right here, things start to come together for me, and we might be seeing the beginning of these monsters, when they still existed at a level comprehensible to humans. This model, whatever it is, appears to stand in a line of trees, presumably on Earth. Could this suggest that the humans were fighting these models at this scale around the present day? It appears like, in this instance, we can see the models towering over a desolate planet, which we zoom out onto later. I'm not sure if this is Earth, but it's a possibility. In this shot here, there's a brand new iteration of these models, which, in my opinion, is the most advanced and well put together, perhaps the final stage of this evolution, resembling sort of a cat almost. Somehow, after becoming so non lifelike, these things made their way back to what we'd consider a conceivable life form. What it's doing, however, is still unknown. This leads to the final shot of the series, which is yet the most confusing. We see some sort of platform, with creatures looking in, but they aren't the cat model we just witnessed, nor the entities from the first video. No, these lamppost looking things resemble this creature from earlier. But what are they? The video ends with a panning of space, including familiar triangles drifting through the frame. Alright, guys, I have presented what is genuinely the weirdest series I've covered yet. And if you're confused, that is perfectly fine because I'm confused too. I can almost promise you that we will not hit the nail on the head with exactly what's going on here today. This is something that we'll need to theorize about together and come back to. But I will try and present a narrative because I want to get as close as possible to solving this and figuring out the story that Unorthodox Kitten is trying to tell. Right off the bat, let's establish a few things. Thematically speaking, before we even identify a specific plot, this series is reaching into a specific corner of our brains, activating a certain type of fear that humans didn't really evolve to be scared of, because it's just so incomprehensible. But somehow, it's just as threatening. The idea of all life being wiped out in an instant. The idea of endless cycles and themes of insignificance. All of humanity's history, discoveries, every little thing we contributed to, wiped out in an instant. Not just destroyed and scattered, but erased from ever having existed, making way for a new cycle. New forms of life, entirely different from our own. Or maybe not even life, maybe just different things. A different universe with different rules. Cosmic terror. The question is, how did we get here? To start, as a lot of commenters have identified and the creator has hinted at, we can trace these developments back to one species: humans. I unfortunately believe that, whatever's happening here, we are to blame. There's a general theme in the video descriptions of hubris and one's creation leading to one's downfall. And this falls in line with so many human stories. We honestly tend to do this a lot. I think at some point in the distant future, humans made constructs, for a purpose we'll dive into soon, that somehow became sentient in a way we didn't expect. Maybe not capable of cellular reproduction, but of much greater, more powerful things, making them a strange form of life so foreign that we couldn't perceive them. There are actually clues besides just the Andromeda and Milky Way collision to give us an idea of when this series takes place. The first is this date right here, 59/3/59/1923. Assuming this is written in day, month, year, which checks out given the creators from Czechia, we could simply divide 359 by 12 to get about 29, and take the 59th day of the year, which would be February 28th, 1942. To my knowledge, nothing in terms of technological advances happened on that day of noteworthiness, like the dropping or completion of the nuclear bomb, for example, but it does take place during World War II, which could signify that technological innovations were leading to whatever happened occurred all the way back then. The next clue is this pyramid, which refers to an actual real-life monument. It's called the Wemdinger Zeit Pyramid, and it's an art installation in Germany. One block is added every 10 years, and it was designed by a local artist to illustrate just how long 1200 years is, because the town of Wemding traced its history back to 793. So this was created in 1993 and should be completed by 3813. If we assume that it's completed in this shot, it would indicate that this future war between humanity and their machines begun in the 39th century, which is a lot more feasible than 4.5 billion years into the future. I'm going to assume that at that point, humanity adopted a new calendar, if they even were around, by the time the galaxies collided, and that the galactic year 2032 for the Milkdromeda galaxy is just a whole different notation. It has nothing to do with 2032 as we understand it. So now this is a bit more grounded in reality. I could see humanity making it to 3800 at least. But what happened then? Well, this is where things get a bit fishy. I think that humanity was creating superstructures like the artificial stars mentioned in the video description of the final upload to harness energy. The generation of these superstructures probably involved creating artificial forms of life to manage what we couldn't easily compute on our own, and I think they spiraled out of control. They celebrated with fireworks as they launched these computers into space to do humanity's bidding, but they did something that no one could have expected, mimicking an instant destruction of humanity, or at least starting the beginning of the end. Once activated, these things grew, evolving in their sentience, gaining the ability to reproduce and consume one another, as we see in the first video. Perhaps they evolved over millions of years to gain the ability to move through time, and at that point, they could go to the past and muck everything up, which is why the timeline gets so confusing. We may even be seeing different timelines here. all coming from the catalyst of whatever human inventions creating these life forms, but which result in different confrontations at different times. In this video, we see combat between these forms and humans, which in my opinion takes place in the 39th century. But we also see a shot with artillery fire here, and to be honest, I can't imagine we'd still have conventional weapons by then. So maybe as indicated by the date, there was a confrontation during World War II. Maybe these all show instances of the creatures traveling to different times in human history. We were fighting machines that didn't exist yet. I think that's also why we have this second-person narration in the first film. It could be someone watching from outside the universe, sure, or it could be humans trying to beam information back in time to help past humans understand the present threat. Imagine humans from the year 3893 trying to tell us, in the midst of World War II, how to fight against an incomprehensible creature that could travel through time. It's crazy. This is just my theory for the foundation of this series. I think these superstructures are the genesis of this entire conflict, and I do think it's humans versus their own creations, which evolve and evolve and evolve and move through time in different stages. It's increasingly complicated and will only get worse. We also have to address two forms of creatures which look different than the other models. Those I'll call Catman and Lampman. Because they look like that, I don't know. I believe this cat is the final form of the models from the first episode. But these creatures, these really made me think. Though I can't quite explain it, I feel as if these creatures aren't enemies. They feel close to omnipotent, or at least very powerful, but they don't seem like antagonists. Perhaps these are the creatures speaking to us in the second person. I want to say that these are the counterparts to the models, and I'd perhaps even go as far as to say that they're the current stage of humanity. Those who somehow filtered through the cosmic erasure, through some timeline or universe that was spared, eventually evolving into this form, and they're trying to help past humanity prevent their mistakes, salvaging whatever universes they can. Going from here though, I do think, at least thematically speaking, we'll need a lot more uploads to get an idea of the entire story, and if there's any hope for humanity surviving this existential threat. But that doesn't mean we're done here. A large theme I've avoided talking about until now are the mathematical components of this series. Advanced math and physics have a lot to do with this story, or at least major ideas are defined using mathematical vocabulary. This is where I don't help too much. Anyone who knows me in real life can attribute to math being my weakest suit. But seriously, there are tons of clues to this project in these scientific papers, as well as the equations in the background. Hardworking commenters like those I'm showing now have already cracked at this a little bit, and their contributions give me the understanding that maybe the math in these papers and background shots are more about introducing big picture themes, like the idea of perspective. What I've gathered from this paper is that we could interpret these data structures referenced as parallel universes, or simulated universes within another universe. I don't think there's a magic key located in these background shots, no, but I do think that recognizing the equations, authors, and themes of these papers can lead us to identifying basic but crucial elements of the story, potentially confirming my ideas on time travel or parallel universes. That's not something that I know how to solve today, but I do really want your guys' help. As always, I've linked the project and these papers in the description of this video, so if you want to get involved with solving these puzzles, I would really love your help. Comment below or share your thoughts in my Discord, the link to which is also in the video's description. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this super weird deep dive. What did you guys think about this type of horror? I really struggled to put into words how it made me feel because it was just so unique. This is one of those projects where I'll be eagerly awaiting an update, as I really want to see where this story goes. As always, comment your thoughts, and please show love to the original creator by supporting their content however you prefer, viewing, sharing, subscribing, or whatnot. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel if you enjoy these dives into lesser-known analog and internet horror projects, and if you really want to be part of something fun, consider joining the channel Discord as well. That's all the seed butter for tonight, folks. We will have another video at the same time next week, so remember to check right back here when that time comes. Thanks for supporting my smaller channel and helping me on my journey to 100,000 subs. Best wishes to you all, and good night.